2,000 miles. What's it really like? Well folks, I have been riding the 2019 KTM Superduke GT for 2 weeks, just over 2 weeks, 2 weeks and 1 day. And I've currently done just over 2,100 odd miles, I think. And I'm on my way back to KTM UK now to hand it back. If you haven't seen the initial first ride review vid, go and check that out up there. So that was the initial euphoric, oh my god, what a weapon vid. With the emotions you would undoubtedly feel when you swing your leg over this beast. And it is a beast. But what is it like to live with? Ah, perfectly timed. Talking about living with the KTM Superduke GT. Well, if it's going to be your everyday bike, then you're going to have this to face, no doubt, at some point. Commuting traffic. Now, as we all know, because I don't hide it, I love the BMW R1200 GS. And that is what I honk in and out of town every single day, central London on that. Now I don't think there's any issue with that commuting at all. It nips in and out of traffic, no problems whatsoever. This is probably just as wide, if not a smidgen wider in the handlebars, but it seems to fit through gaps better than the big GS does. However, where it falls down is the steering lock. It's got a sports bike-esque steering lock. It's not as bad as, you know, a full-on sports bike, but it's nowhere near as manoeuvrable in slow conditions when you're having to do full lock turns as the big old GS or other big thumping BMWs and bikes like that. You know, the bars literally do not go right the way around, they sort of lock there. Now, I don't know if it's maybe just because the chain is stretched a little bit in the last couple of thousand miles, but the quick shifter certainly doesn't feel as slick as it was when I first got on it. It's still by no means horrendous. I seem to remember when I first got on it just felt like butter. However, I have since jumped back on another GS, not mine, but on another GS. This one only had about 5,000 odd miles. But that just felt so silky smooth, so that's a little bit surprising. Be interesting to see what Helga feels like when I jump back on her. Hey, thank you very much, top work people. See, why would you sit in a car? If you didn't have to, why would you sit in a car? Motorbike's the way to go, people, dudes. The engine, that engine is the total selling point of this bike. I mean, just listen to that. That's a stock exhaust. It sounds like some sort of muscle car, and it's great when you're filtering through traffic. You can just pop the clutch in, give a little bit of a blip, let everybody know you're coming, and through you go. Now the headlights, the front of this bike is a real Marmite point, I think, for people. Some people love it, some people hate it. I don't mind it, to be honest with you. I'm not bothered at all. I think it sits really well with the design of the bike. It's a little bit quirky. I wasn't convinced that people would see you coming, I have to admit, but whether it's because of the noise of the exhaust, the orientation of the headlights, or a combination of both, I don't really know, but people definitely notice that you're there. This is where I get wiped out. Come on, dude. No. And that can only be a good thing. Oh, the joys of the M25. This is a major arterial motorway, folks. If you're not familiar with the UK's roads, people, if you're from overseas, welcome. You may well have heard of the M25, one of the world's biggest car parks. People often ask, you know, how did I get on riding in all these different foreign countries when I was on my trip? And I've got to say, if you can ride in London and the southeast then you can pretty much ride anywhere, because there's not many places in the world that have congestion worse than we do down here, certainly inside the city of London. There are a few places without exception. I haven't ridden in India and I've been told that is horrendous. However, I have ridden in Jakarta and around there in Indonesia, and that I can only describe as biblical. Again, if you've not checked out those episodes, have a look at the link up above. So outside of congested traffic, what is the KTM Superduke GT all about? You alright?
Won't keep me long, we're just clearing that vehicle.
Yeah, no problem.
You just stay behind us when we move forward until we let you go.
No bother at all. Cheers. No amount of manoeuvrability will get you through this. Blooming GoPro. Sometimes it'll record, sometimes it won't. Can somebody out there just make an action camera that works? That would be great. Just an action camera that actually works. That would be brilliant. If it could have the audio and visual quality of the GoPro and the stabilisation and the battery life and form of the drift, combine those two, you have a winning action camera. Can someone please do it? Anyway, onward! This bike is fun to ride. There's no getting away from that. The engine, the chassis, the riding position, everything is aggressive, and it's to put the grin back on your face, the fun back into riding, and it does that in bucket loads. The Superduke GT has over 170 brake horsepower, 170, and it's got over 140 Newton meters of torque. This thing, it's a Clydesdale horse on steroids. It's got 4 different ride modes: rain, street, sport, and if you get the power parts option installed, track. I haven't even touched track, there's just no point. However, your rain mode, obviously it just feels a little bit more dulled down, not quite as aggressive power delivery. Street tends to be the most popular, much smoother with the throttle delivery, but still loads of power. I just keep it in sport, just because that's how I like that ride. But street is probably the preferred one of the vast majority out there. Your suspension levels, again, I would normally always have it in sport, but actually sport for me is probably too tough. When you start coming onto normal British roads, they're a little bit too bumpy for the sport for me, especially if you're riding with purpose. So I find dropping it to street just smooths it out a lot. But for the track, sport setting would be pucker. Track mode just gives you total control over the bike. There's 10-stage anti-wheelie in this. 10-stage. You can turn it completely off, or you can have it so it clamps both wheels to the deck. That's all unleashed with track mode. You can alter the ABS, there's loads of stuff you can do, the throttle delivery. So if you're a bit of a track monster and you like to have a little fiddle with what goes on in your bike, the power parts track option is the one for you. If you don't, just stick with the bog standard modes. That engine, oh. She's bogging, isn't she? I can't take her back like that. The wheels are still bogging, but she's a bit better than what she was. Right, let's go and have a little chat. So, what do I think of the bike? There's no denying the GT is a fantastic machine. It really is. It's a whole load of fun. It's got character. That V-twin engine is just phenomenal. The power it delivers is insane. However, for an utter animal on the road, it's also quite civilised. You can potter around the town with that bike, no problem at all. It's not too keen on real low speed, so anything sort of 10 mile an hour and under in first gear, the engine will protest quite a bit. You'll have to feather the clutch with that. But the fuel delivery is pretty decent. Once you put it under drive, once it gets under drive, certainly over sort of 3,500, 4,000 revs, that engine comes alive. I mean, that is where that engine is supposed to be. Under power, accelerated through the rev range. Then the thing just lights up. That bike is all about smiles and the miles. No shadow of a doubt. It is a hoot. There's no better words. You'll be hooting and hollering in your lid with that bike. It's fantastic. As I've said, the handling is amazing. It is razor sharp. You line that bike up for a corner, put it on whatever line you want to take, and it will just follow that line all the way around. It's beautiful. It doesn't feel as flickable as some. Thanks for that, pal. We'll wait for that bike to stop. The GS feels a bit more agile. It feels more flickable, a bit more energetic. The GT is like your steroid-infused sprinter, whereas the GS feels more like an all-round athlete, believe it or not. I never thought I'd say that about a GS. But the GS definitely seems a little bit more user-friendly, a little bit more drawn back than the GT. The GT's full on, let's have it, let's go. But it is quite well mannered as well. You know, you can quite happily just sit on that bike and tour if that's what you want to do. You don't have to be going hell for leather all the time on the GT. But when I compare the two, and that's what a lot of people have been asking already, would I swap the GT for the GS? Then for me it's a no, and I'll cover that now. So how could you possibly put the GS over this? Well, if it just came down to the fun factor, this would win all day long, definitely. This has that hooligan element that the 1200 GS anyway. I've not had enough time on the 1250. I've literally rode it for sort of 25 minutes on the motorway. That's all I've ridden that for. I do have a 1250 GS, not the GS Adventure, the 1250 GS. I do have one of them coming at some point fairly soon, I'm hoping. Just in talks with BMW UK at the moment to acquire one of them for a bit of a review. But as far as the 1200 goes, at least this has the fun factor that it lacks. However, with that fun factor, you lose a little bit of practicality in the sense that this is not uncomfortable by any stretch of the imagination. It's not uncomfortable. But like I said before with the Super Adventure, I actually think this is more comfortable than the Super Adventure. But after an hour and a half, 2 hours, my knees, my left knee in particular, that starts to get sore, which it just doesn't do on the GS. And I find that when I refuel, I'm looking forward to that time off the bike. A bit like with the sports bike, to be honest with you, a bit like with my old Jigsaw. Every time I fuel up, just have a little walk around, a wee stretch, and off you go. You can jump back on the bike and off you go again. But with the GS, I can literally, and I have done, ride that from Land's End to John O'Groats, have a cup of tea, cup of coffee, maybe a slice of cake, jump back on the bike and ride home again. On this, it would be much more of a chore. It would be fun, don't get me wrong, but I'd be feeling it for sure. There's the other factor of, we all know I am no off-road aficionado. I seldom go off-road, purely because I don't know what I'm doing. So if anyone out there wants to teach me how to go off-road, I'm your man. I'm all up for that. But the GS gives you that opportunity. So I can ride that GS all the way down to southern Spain, say I'm going off for Toro Adventure. I can ride my own bike down there, packed up with all the kit that I need. I can charge everything on the go. This, although yeah, it does have that lovely little waterproof pocket for your phone, but it's the practicalities of it. You can't actually fit the phone in the pocket. What's the sense in that? You could fit a tank bag on here, for sure you could, and you could run power into it just like you do in the GS. Absolutely no problem. You could fit a back box, you could fit panniers to it, but it's just once you get there with the GS, if you choose just to do the left and go up the little mountain track, well, you can do that. You literally push one button, which is accessible right there on the handlebars, and you just change your engine mode. With this, there's no real off-road function to it. No doubt you could ride it off-road if you had the skills, but it would be more of a handful than the GS would. So again, it's just the ease that the GS has, you know. The riding modes are one touch away with a button, whereas this you have to go into the menu and cycle through the menu. Yes, you can set them as your favourites, so you know you've got the quick option 1 and 2 there on the handlebars, pushing up and down on the selectors, but it's just much easier on the GS. This has the backlit buttons. That's the pro for the KTM. The GS hasn't got that. It's all swings and roundabouts really, but just overall for me, for an everyday bike that I would use 365 a year, 24/7 in some cases, in every single weather type, for me it would have to be the GS. But do not take anything away from this bike. The GT is phenomenal. Now, price. Price is a bit of a polarising subject on these. They start at 16,795 on the road, but that is the basic model. And a lot of people turn around and go, well, that's cheaper than the GS, it's more bang for your buck. However, what you need to remember, 16,795, that is the basic model. Doesn't even have quick shifter, heated grips, nothing like that. It's basically the bike and engine. Once you start adding all the toys, the bells and whistles, the power parts, things like the comfortable seat, heated seats, the heated grips, quick shifters, the track pack to give you access to the track mode. Well, I've done all that, and I didn't even add everything, but it came to just under 20 grand. Straight away, it's already about £1,000 more expensive than a similarly equipped GS. That's the difference. However, KTM have a habit of running some mega deals. I mean mega deals. And right now, at this very moment, there are some stonking deals available on brand new KTM 1290 Superduke GTs. You can pick up one of these, believe it or not, for around the 12 grand mark. Brand new, 12 grand. You know, straight away that's a saving of well over 4 grand. So my advice to you, if you're thinking of one of these, A, test ride one, and B, shop around. Maybe wait a little bit, ask around in some dealerships, get on the forums, because when they run the deals, KTM offer some stonking buys, and you'd be gutted if you just spent near enough 20 grand on a bike and then the next month it's available for 4 or 5 grand less. So folks, a 2-week affair with the KTM Superduke GT has come to an end. 2,045 miles. I've loved every second of it, I really have. Right folks, hope you've enjoyed the vid. As always, thank you so much for all your support, all you subscribers old and new, and all you clans folk over on the Patreon. I cannot thank each and every one of you enough. A huge thanks to KTM for loaning me the bike. I've enjoyed every second of it. Right folks, get on out there, do your thing, but remember, look after those that you love, but live your life. Yep, Helga's safe.